This is TOEFL IBT speaking test, and this test evaluates your ability to communicate in English in an academic setting. It consists of 4 tasks. Task 1, express an opinion on a familiar topic. Listening, extended, 90 seconds, conversation summary. Woman, she's enthusiastic about the new program. She says she tried meditation last year during exam week, and it really helped her focus and manage her anxiety. She thinks starting the day with a calm mindset will improve productivity and help students handle academic pressure. She also likes that the sessions are free and outdoors, which makes them accessible and refreshing. Man, he completely disagrees. He says 7 a.m. is unrealistic for most students, especially those with evening classes or part-time jobs. He argues that instead of meditation, the university should offer stress relief activities later in the day, like yoga in the student center or study breaks with snacks. He also thinks the wellness credit is meaningless since it doesn't affect GPA or graduation requirements. Listening, lecture summary. The professor expands on this idea with two detailed examples. First, he discusses a campaign launched by several cities to reduce plastic pollution by banning thin plastic bags. The plan worked at first, but stores started selling thicker reusable plastic bags that people didn't actually reuse. As a result, the total amount of plastic waste actually increased instead of decreasing. Next, he talks about an environmental project in Yellowstone National Park. Decades ago, wolves were removed from the park to protect livestock, but this caused the deer population to explode. The overgrazing by deer destroyed young trees and plants. When wolves were reintroduced years later, deer numbers dropped, vegetation returned, and other animal populations like birds and beavers also recovered. He concludes that these cases show how human decisions, no matter how well-intentioned, can create ripple effects, some harmful, some beneficial, that people rarely anticipate. Task 4. Integrated Speaking. Academic lecture only. Listening. Extended. 120 seconds. Lecture topic. The Zeigarnik effect. The professor introduces the concept of the Zeigarnik effect, a psychological phenomenon discovered by Bluma Zeigarnik, a Russian psychologist in the early 20th century. She noticed something interesting while sitting in a cafe in Vienna. Waiters could easily remember orders that hadn't been paid for yet, but once the customers settled the bill, the waiters quickly forgot the details. Curious about this, Zeigarnik conducted experiments and found that people tend to remember unfinished or interrupted tasks better than completed ones. She suggested that when a task is incomplete, the mind remains somewhat open, keeping that information active until the task is finished. The professor then explains how this effect shows up in daily life. For example, students often can't relax if they leave an assignment unfinished because their brains keep reminding them of it. On the other hand, this mental tension can also be useful. It motivates people to return to incomplete work and get it done. Finally, she mentions modern applications of the Zeigarnik effect. Productivity coaches sometimes encourage people to write down unfinished tasks at night to clear their minds and reduce anxiety before sleep. By acknowledging the task, the brain feels a sense of closure, even if the work isn't done yet.
I prefer learning something new through hands-on experience rather than just reading about it. First, practical experience allows me to understand concepts more deeply because I am actively involved rather than just observing. For example, when I was learning to cook, I could read countless recipes, but I only truly understood the techniques and timing when I actually prepared the dishes myself and adjusted the flavors as I went. Second, hands-on learning helps me remember information for a longer time. I once tried learning basic carpentry by watching instructional videos, but I only remembered the techniques when I built a small bookshelf with my own hands. Third, learning by doing also teaches problem solving and critical thinking because it exposes me to real challenges that books or articles cannot fully explain. For instance, while gardening, I had to figure out how to deal with pests and soil problems, things I could not have learned from a book alone. For all these reasons, I strongly believe that hands-on experience is the most effective way to learn new skills. The man does not support the new Mindful Morning program. He thinks it is not practical for most students because the sessions start very early at 7 a.m., and many students have evening classes, part-time jobs, or long commutes, so they would not be able to attend regularly. He also believes that the wellness credit is not meaningful because it does not count toward graduation requirements or affect students' GPA, so it does not provide a real incentive. In addition, he argues that the university could offer stress relief activities at more convenient times, such as yoga sessions in the afternoon or short breaks with snacks in the student center, which would help more students relax and focus. Finally, he suggests that while meditation might be useful for some, the program as designed is unlikely to benefit the majority of students because of its timing and limited impact. Overall, he thinks the program is inconvenient, not very effective, and not worth students' time. The lecture provides two examples that clearly illustrate the law of unintended consequences. The first example is a campaign to reduce plastic pollution by banning thin plastic bags. The goal of the campaign was to decrease plastic waste, but people responded by buying thicker reusable bags that they often did not reuse, which actually increased the total amount of plastic waste. This shows that even well-intentioned actions can have unexpected negative results. The second example is the reintroduction of wolves into Yellowstone National Park. When wolves returned, they reduced the deer population, which allowed plants and young trees to grow again. This, in turn, helped other animals, like birds and beavers, to thrive. The positive effects on the ecosystem were unplanned, demonstrating an unexpected beneficial outcome. Both examples show that actions can have consequences that differ from what was originally intended, either harmful or beneficial. In this way, the lecture clearly illustrates the law of unintended consequences described in the reading. The lecture explains the Zeigarnik effect, which is a psychological phenomenon showing that people remember unfinished or interrupted tasks better than completed ones. The professor gives an example of waiters in a cafe who could easily remember unpaid orders, but once the customers paid, the waiters quickly forgot the details. This demonstrates that unfinished tasks remain active in our minds. The lecture also explains how this effect appears in everyday life. For instance, students often feel anxious when they leave assignments incomplete because their minds keep reminding them to finish the work. At the same time, the Zeigarnik effect can be helpful because this mental tension motivates people to return to tasks and complete them. Finally, the professor mentions that productivity experts suggest writing down unfinished tasks at night to close the mental loop, which helps reduce stress and improve sleep. Overall, the Zeigarnik effect affects both memory and behavior by making incomplete tasks more memorable and encouraging people to take action.